2020 isn't the bad year, but it's the start of a bad decade. Story 1. Then I picked the wrong decade to stop sniffing glue. Edit. Holy cow guys. This is a quote from the movie Airplane, but the sentiment is based in reality. I quit drinking 8 days ago. The past 2 days have been difficult, and all these positive vibes have helped a lot, thanks. Story 2. I'm pretty sure the suicide rate would go up a lot. Edit. If you're thinking about doing it, please don't. I'm just saying that here so I don't have to keep typing it. Please don't do it. Seek help. Edit. 2. Suicide prevention hotline is 800-273-8255. Edit. 3. According to oxygen makers, you can text home to 741,741 if you'd rather text than call. Story 3. Well, obviously that's what it is. 2020 isn't a series of freak accidents. It's a series of extremely predictable and interconnected disasters that could probably have been prevented. Story 4. Bring it on, I guess. Can't do nothing about it. My great-grandparents and geek-great-grandparents got through war, economic depression, and a pandemic without a gaming PC. No reason I can't do it with one. Not that it'd be easy. I'd probably cry a lot if every year ended up like this one. I could really use a break. But I'd do it, even if just to off all the fascists, extremists, and troglodytes that want me and my values dead and buried. Story 5. I mean, in truth, 2020 isn't that bad of a year. Yeah, it sucked in comparison to the last decade or so, but we've had worse stretches. The Great Depression made this seem like a cakewalk. 2001 was a pretty rough year, if you'll recall, and 2002 wasn't a whole lot better. There was a housing collapse in the mid-late aughts. I remember because my mom actually lost her house during that time and I was still a kid living with her. We've had pandemics before, we'll have them again. Life ain't that bad yet, but you raise a good question. What if this is only the beginning? Biden appears to be on track to win the election. What happens if somehow Trump subverts the will of the people, becomes a full-on dictator? Or what if Biden gets to take office but the economy continues to spiral downward anyway? What if COVID is just the first in a long line of new viruses that just get worse and worse? What if a year from now a bunch of lunatics are walking up and down our streets with a meat wagon, ringing a bell, and shouting bring out your dead? What if our relationship with North Korea deteriorates under a Biden administration and Kim Jong-un nukes Blacksburg, South Carolina? What if Jason Voorhees is real and he takes Manhattan? What if 3 years from now the American dollar is worth 0.000001 cent and bread is 16 a loaf? What if a comet the size of the one that killed the dinosaurs is just behind Saturn and on its way here right now? Lordy, I need a Xanax. Thanks for stressing me out. Story 6. Then it is what it is. Because it's bad, it doesn't mean that anything good can happen. Someone will find their soulmate. Somebody will see their child for the first time. Someone will get an organ donation they so desperately need. Someone will find a hobby they enjoy and will grow to love. Somebody will buy their first house. Someone will achieve what they worked hard for. Sometimes those things will happen in public, sometimes in private, but I guarantee that it will happen. No matter how much of a bad insert time span it is, there will always good things happening and you'll never have to look far for you to see them. May something good happen to you today. Story 7. My projections for the 2020s are more low-mid intensity interstate conflicts, with the potential of one of them escalating, the beginning of mass migrations due to environmental pressures, rising inequality, and rising nationalism. Story 8. 2020 is the trailer for 2021. Since people can't wear a mask or stay home, I bet those same people are gonna go to New Year's parties and then there will be a massive spike and then it's just going to get worse till the FDA decides to approve medicine for it. Story 9. 2020 doesn't have the monopoly on bad years. Remember when 2019 was a bad year, and 18 and 17, is this a very strange year in human history? Absolutely. Is it magnified by the fact it's an election year, at least in America? But everyone seems to be watching, no doubt. Have we seen worse years in human history? That's a huge and undisputed yes. This decade will have its fair share of ups and downs, deaths that hit hard, years that hurt your soul and take away pinnacles of your childhood memories. The only way that doesn't happen is if your life is the one that ends during the time frame, and then what's to worry about? Television and social media has a tendency to have us not see past the moment you're in as if it will last forever. This too shall pass, both good and bad, and well make it out on the other end. If not, there's still nothing to worry about because it'll all be over anyway. Survive and thrive or surrender and die. At the end it's up to your choices and a bit of luck, and I wish you the best of both. Story 10. Please let's not put this in people's minds. It can damage people's already fragile mental state. Let's keep giving people hope. The world is already enough as it is. Edit. Just because you don't get stressed depressed thinking the world is going to with no way to fix it doesn't mean other people don't get extremely stressed and depressed thinking about this stuff. Think about how other people feel, not just yourself. Having hope isn't a bad thing. Having hope can help the world if we do the right things. We can still save the planet. It's not too late yet. Stay safe, people. Check on the people around you. Make sure they know they can talk to you and that they're not alone. A lot of people have lost loved ones and jobs this year and are feeling helpless. Let them know you're there for them. We all need each other during these times and not making it worse for others. Story 11. I hate to break it to you, but there really is no if here. Keep an eye on the million-acre megafires and back-to-back-to-back hurricanes, the unprecedented absence of sea ice, the melting permafrost and massive methane leaks, not to mention ancient pathogens with the potential to cause new pandemics. Once it really sinks in that this is not only the new normal, but will continue to get worse. A whole lot of valuable property will become effectively uninsurable, unsellable. Millions, if not tens of millions, of people will go bankrupt and relocate in a relatively brief time span. This will add pressure in safer for a while areas to already nearly exhausted topsoil and groundwater, to say nothing of decaying infrastructure in the US at least. Mileage may vary in developed countries. Between this and the continuing worsening crop losses due to erratic flooding, intense winds looking at you on both in 2 years, Iowa etc., will very likely lead to food shortages. Homelessness will skyrocket. This will cause massive social upheaval and likely cause banks to fail. We're in that moment at the high point of the track on a roller coaster where you first feel you're lifting out of the seat as you start downward. Make sure your seatbelt is fastened. Seriously though, buy a gun, set up a vehicle you can live in if you have to evacuate, and dig up a lawn to grow some food. Shit's about to get interesting. Story 12. This isn't some bad year. This is the culmination of decades of ignorance, apathy and selfishness. All of this was seen in advance and warned against. Yet here we are. This year isn't something that is happening to us. We actually directly caused it with our stupidity. Story 13. For some reason, even 10-20 years ago, I always thought something very bad was going to happen in the 2020s. But that might just be because so many sci-fi things were set in the 2020s, or something. Story 14. I mean, that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. Climate change is just going to get more and more destructive. The COVID pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon. There's a new flu that is apparently becoming difficult to contain as well. The best years are behind us. The scale of change that needs to happen to prevent climate destruction is utterly impossible in the current geopolitical climate. There is no cooperation. Aside from that, economic destabilization has been intensifying from COVID and climate change as well. Wildfires, floods, and droughts are and will continue to up the world's food supply. We've had our golden years and pissed them away, not making enough change to fix our future. Like man growing up in the 80s and 90s, I was swept up into environmentalism. Nobody listened except other activists. I remember talking to Governor Tom Ridge when the Environmental Club got a time slot with him. We begged him to create regulation to limit fracking and to actually make recycling easy for people. Guess what? He didn't do about fracking, and in fact over the next 10 years it got so bad here that you can literally go to creeks and light the water on fire. We had a huge fish die-off back in the early aughts from it. TLDR, we are so moving forward if we can't come together and tackle climate change. Story 15. Well, it is the start of a bad couple of years. Maybe even longer. I kind of doubt it will be a decade. We are going to have a hard time for the next few years. The handling of the situation was not thought out very well. We know that within the first 20 years of every century since 1420 there has been a global outbreak. We know that it takes 2 or more years to recover. Nothing has been done to preserve businesses or keep certain industries alive. Stores are starting to run out of stock simply because people are staying home instead of making things for stores to sell. I went to Fry's recently and almost half the store is empty. Stock on various items is just not available. I went to Michael's a few weeks ago and they are almost out of all of their painting supplies. If this continues, those stores will not be able to sell enough product to stay in business. This will have a ripple effect that will impact the entire economy. For reference, I live in the USA. I am not an economist. Story 16. If it is the start of a bad decade, then I wonder which apocalypse will come first. Virus kills 99, nuclear war and winter, mass famine, mass revolutions, insane climate and weather. It's exciting and scary to think about. Story 17. In recent times it seems that the start of the decade is always the worst. 1980s started with the after effects of the oil crisis and lead to the European missile crisis. The 90s started with the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. The 2000s started with 9/11 attacks and following wars in the Middle East. The 2010s started with the European debt crisis and the Arabian Spring. And now the 2020s start with a pandemic. But all examples from before show us that in the end we still live and life improves for most people. Just think about how much we combated famine, poverty and anti-democratic governments in the last 3 decades. Progress is happening, even when we have these setbacks. Story 18. Just my opinion, but some of these comments are way too pessimistic and quite frankly pure conjecture without much basis in fact. Throughout history people have always predicted the imminent collapse of the world, but we've always managed to survive. Yes, climate change is a big problem, but countries are shifting towards renewable energy. Yes, we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, but previous generations have gone through the same thing without a quarter of our medical advances. I'm sure there are going to be political upheavals, economic struggles, and power shifts in the near future, but such is the natural course of history. We're in the thick of it now, so it's understandable to feel like it's the end of the world, but I for one think we'll get through this. Story 19. We're on a steep downward trajectory that was preordained since before any of us were born. Global capitalism is sprinting headfirst into the harsh realities of resource limitations and environmental degradation. Normal is over, it's all downhill from here. Story 20. Kinda tired of this. People been blaming bad times on whatever arbitrary year it is, then praying for the end of the year like everything will be better on January 1st like it's magic. Is gonna till we work to fix it. People been blaming the year it is since like 2016 or 2017. And Jay know it's all a joke, but it's getting people in the habit of doing nothing and waiting for the year to end like it's going to fix problems. I will go to the CEO of bad stuff and personally ask them to stop. Story 21. If Trump gets revoked with his climate policy, The 2030s are gonna bump it up to another level, and it'll never go back, only get exponentially worse. No one's yet to say if Biden's gonna be a whole lot better either, just so I'm clear on that. Story 22 depends on your definition of bad, uncomfortable and frightening perhaps, but also a time of change for the better, because, it's painful and dangerous to keep doing things the way we have the past 40 years. Story 23 This feels like the moment when the main protagonist says things can't get any worse, and after 2 seconds a giant worm bursts from the ground causing a massive earthquake and tsunami, and the protagonist is only a bell to deal with it, and the worm is bigger than Godzilla and fully coated with metal armor, so please don't. Story 24 we launched astronauts from US vehicles for the first time in 9 years and we've made huge scientific leaps. Not saying there's no downsides, but it's easy to overlook the good when social media sells you panic. 247. Your panic is their wealth. Focus on your own life. Stop and smell the roses every once in a while. Story 25 It could also be the start of a great decade. You just never know, and expectations will surely lead us to heartache. All we can do is ensure that our own selves are taken care of and happy. Not much else you can do. Story 26 I don't know jack squat, but it seems people are forgetting the long-term effects of climate change. Call me a tree hugger, but that's not a trend if all the science says we're in the near future, 9 billion 2050. I hear this all the time. How are we going to expect this to bear to fruition if global circumstances don't allow for this to happen safely? We can't twiddle our thumbs for our government to combat our socio-economic issues, international affairs, and environmental issues. Each level of society affects how the planet bounces back from our punches. We can't freeze glaciers back. Higher ocean levels means coastal cities go further underwater and by 2050 might even lose whole areas. Ocean life is a lot more important to us than we think. It's also the most affected by climate change. Every year the temperature goes up. Bugs, people hate bugs. But it's going to get increasingly worse when harmful vectors like mosquitoes don't get frozen out by the winter and last throughout the year. This causes an imbalance in several levels in the ecosystem. If you live in seasons, not only will you be dealing with snow sludge, you got biters who are still able to direct inject the next line of epidemic into your blood. Don't even get me started on potential future sicknesses or the rise of antimicrobial resistance. Loss of ecological systems from large animals to annoying insects and microbes means our loss too. Overfishing, overhunting, mismanaging land. All of it becomes issues we will need to overcome as the procrastinators we are. But unlike a paper assignment, we won't have time and resources to punch out a paper. We would need some unicorn council intervention to save our hides. We want to blame corporations. But we do have a part in all of this too. You don't need to buy convenience items all the time. Having a car is a necessity at times, but we can carpool and also invest in practices that mean lower exhaust and lower waste, which result in lower junkyard contribution. Think twice before throwing things away. Karenism is a terrible act on our own people, but who says you can't deploy it on company CEOs or royal empires? Industries are terrified of the angry consumer, and as much as I cringe seeing the next tweet on uninformed ways to act, let's do seemingly harmful action. If people come together, informed and loud, companies will move. Our government too. We are a generation with a lot on our shoulders. It sucks, everything hurts, but we need to stop pitying ourselves and do something, not only for the generations to come, if we can even survive what will happen, but for ourselves. Because I'm not happy living in 100F for longer than summertime, and so do a bunch of people who blast their air conditioning 248 when it's unnecessary. Edit for the record, I am saying 2020 is the start of a domino effect in agreement to the Post's question. If we don't demand radical change into the Jetsons now, it would go to say that I wouldn't even want to live on this planet in the next few years. We face a lot of factors, but we need to go into the future with our emotions in check, and making sure we'd our is and cross our T's. Edit 2 sorry. I had to add the 9 billion part and then fix it. Story 27 We've been through harder before, WW1, WW2, Great Depression etc. It's not going to be bad, and the people that think it is have a very bleak worldview. Story 28 2020 has to be the yendi of a bad decade. It started with the death of my last grandparent 2012, followed by the death of my significant other's brother 2013, then my dad died 2014, after that my SO mother passed away 2015, then in 2017 the women ID spent the last 12 years fell ill and died. Last year my mom died. This decade I'm ready for some high notes. Then be the change you wish to see. You can only control what is in your control, no more, no less. Story 29 didn't start in 2016. This is going to be an interesting decade for sure. I hope it cleans up though. As a guy that's moving into adulthood through the next decade, I'm absolutely livid. I still earn all. My diplomas ain't worth ATM. Housing prices are just unreasonable. Life just ain't a good happy time anymore. The boomers got the glorious economy. I get shot down by olds for being lazy because they worked and owned 2 houses by the time they were 25 etc. Houses that were 30K are now 450K. On top of the outrageous cost of living, rent just bumps up non-stop. Minimum wage goes up, but so does the cost of living, so any jobs for extra cash actually end up being a complete waste of time. Can't even smoke if I want. The price of them has hiked like 400 tax on a pack, to keep us healthy for longer, which is funny since we all want to die anyway. Just want a cigarette, at least it doesn't feel good. We are all depressed and anxious whether we like it or not. Are we going to end up being ruled by communist China or Russia within 10 years? The most strange thing to me is that as a human with natural biological desires, I don't want to have any kids because they will end up trapped in screens and living a depressing existence. End result, failed as a human point is last decade has had a hefty hit on us all and the next decade. Well, as a human in modern civilization, I feel ripped off, and we can't escape. In 2008 trillions of dollars in money disappeared. We fixed it by printing trillions of dollars. In 2019 we were starting to come out of that just a bit, and Fed balance sheet was actually starting to look reasonable. Then COVID hit. We've printed about 4 or 5 trillion this year. This may be the start of the worst decade in hundreds of years. Notice the debates. No one even brought up the question of debt. If new monetary theory guys are right, we might be okay. If they are wrong, the world is about to change in ways you cannot imagine. There is not one shred of long-term historical evidence to suggest that NMT is right. Story 30. Back in May I've seen someone answer to a post on Reddit about how bad 2020 was. The comments said you got it wrong. It's not 2020, it's the 20s. It gave me shivers back then. Story 31. I mean, it obviously will be a few bad years at this point. The world's productivity has dropped. Lots of important issues have fallen by the wayside. There's collective worldwide trauma. The impact of this year will ring out for as long as 9/11 if not longer, and we're still feeling that impact in the US's broadening political divide. Story 32. You could argue that we are already in the middle of a bad decade that started in 2016. This isn't just about the USA. Mind you, in 2016, several countries around the world experienced authoritarians coming to power, and their actions have had ripple effects that are still felt today. Story 33. It's not true. It's the opposite. Many good things are starting this year. We are coming together as never before, but the media don't cover it so much. Avoided a Great Depression. Already we avoided a Great Depression with vast amounts of funding, $1 trillion support for struggling countries, and to make sure farmers are able to plant their seeds and have a harvest. The whole world is so connected now, and the wealthiest countries knew that they had to support the lives and livelihoods of the weaker economies for their own protection too. Unemployment is of course high, but the basic structure of our economy is preserved and it can recover. Why we want to have a second Great Depression? Remarkable advances in science, epidemiology, economics, and many world institutions that didn't exist in the 1930s pledges to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. The IPCC report in 2019 showed us how to stop and reverse biodiversity loss. The number one thing is to stop perverse subsidies that subsidize the bad actors that destroy nature services. We need to subsidize the good actors that are sustainable and preserve nature services. Several other things they specifically identified. We save 3 species for every 1 species we lose that's at the brink of extinction, but we should be able to save them all. So the good news is that leaders of 71 nations have already signed the Leaders' Pledge to do this, and things are looking good in the lead up to the next Biodiversity Summit in 2021, when we should be getting firm commitments by many nations on this. Leaders pledge to stop and reverse destruction of biodiversity by 2030 and make this part of the COVID-19 recovery. Many countries are using this for green recovery. It turns out that jobs making renewables or improving efficiency of homes or protecting nature services are good for the economy and build it back stronger. Instead of a short-term boost of jobs, you get a long-term self-reinforcing boost to the economy. COVID-19 recession. Protecting damage to economy and livelihoods worldwide. Many countries will use recovery period to rebuild industry favoring green renewable sustainability nature services biodiversity. China to target zero emissions by 2060. China has recently made a statement of intent to target zero emissions by 2060. With this new target the world is headed for 2.35°C by 2100. With China's new target of zero emissions by 2060, world targets 2.35°C for the end of the century, a reduction of 0.25°C. Cambridge Econometrics Carbon Action Tracker gives similar projection partly due to China. Renewables are cost competitive with the lowest cost fossil fuels almost everywhere including cloudy UK where I live. Prices of solar have fallen a remarkable 10-fold in 10 years, with perovskite another having seemed set to happen sooner rather than later. They are already beginning the process of scaling up to industrial levels of production as they refine the details of the technology. It looks promising. Once solar costs half the price of fossil fuels, which will happen at some point, it makes a pledge to zero emissions by 2050 easier. Perovskite could have solar panel prices yet again, as soon as 2022, already competitive with lowest cost fossil fuels. Japan targets zero emissions by 2050 joining South Korea, the EU, UK, California etc. Japan to pledge to zero emissions by 2050, that's about 3 of world emissions, adds to South Korea, UK, EU. California and then India is 2C compatible already and China's statement of intent for zero emissions by 2060 which is nearly 1.5C compatible. And many smaller countries, more and more of the map gradually turning to 1.5C compatible. Remember we have until 2021 for countries to make their next round of pledges, then another round in 2025 then 2030 and every 5 years from then on. The idea of the Paris Agreement was never to be able to target 1.5C in 2015. It was to make more ambitious targets, every 5 years, build our ambitions based on our experience from the last 5 years, built to a more ambitious target and so on. We are doing exactly that. Next round of pledges in 2021, then 2025, 2030, and every 5 years afterwards. Over worst of COVID-19 by end of 2021. We can be over the worst of COVID-19 by the end of 2021 with a vaccine. The progress on vaccines has been extraordinary, with 10 already in phase 3, and we likely have a vaccine approved in the first quarter next year and may have first results towards the end of this year. COVAX, which will ensure 3 and then 20 and then everyone gets vaccinated together worldwide, now covers 184 countries and 90 of the world population. They have now signed agreements to supply 1 billion doses of vaccine. Their aim is 2 billion by the end of 2021, so they are halfway there already. The 3 will be enough to vaccinate all key workers, health workers, vulnerable care homes, etc., and then to target superspreader events. A targeted vaccination like that can achieve far more than you'd expect from the population. Some countries like the US, EU, Brazil, Mexico, etc. have separate bilateral agreements to target all or nearly all their population early. There are 5 oral vaccines, one of them Vaxart, in phase 1 trials already. These would be as easy to take as any tablet and would make vaccinating the world much easier. They also are far easier to make. The most recent news was that the Oxford vaccine triggers a strong immune response in both elderly people and the very young, and they also don't get bad adverse reactions in them either. That's all very good if it works as a vaccine. Still don't know if the immune response protects you. That is what the phase 3 trial will show. The new thing is they have shown that their vaccine generates a good immune response in elderly people older than 55, and that it also has low reactivity. They don't have bad adverse reactions to the vaccine itself. They don't say what their source is for this data, but will publish it soon. They don't yet know that the vaccine works because they don't know if the immune response protects you. That's what the phase 3 trials are for. Usually an immune response does protect you, but AIDS is an example of a virus that triggers an immune response that doesn't protect you. Coronaviruses are not as bad as AIDS, but they do have some of the glycan coverings that can make an immune response less effective, so they have to deal with that. Story 34. Am I late to this thread? Maybe I'm not. Maybe the people that need to read this most will still read it. If 2020 is just the beginning of a so-called bad decade, so be it. I have had rough decades before. I will probably have a rough decade again. I will not be subdued. I will not be brought low. I have been through worse and I have survived. I don't need much to be happy. I have people in my life that I love and who love me. I have a roof over my head and a bed to sleep in. And even if I didn't, I have survived that before too. The things I treasure most in this life cannot be taken away from me by even the worst circumstances. As long as I have air to breathe, water to drink, and food to eat, I will endure. We will endure. You are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for. 2020 is nothing compared to previous bad years. There have been some seriously bad years throughout history. Losing my main source of income and having to stay home will not break me. I am fortunate to still have a home, and I will never lose sight of how grateful I am for that. There is a quote, a conversation between Frodo and Gandalf, that I feel is appropriate at these times. Frodo: I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. Gandalf: so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Story 35. People will eventually get used to it. Initially everything is shocking, but after a while we adapt to our reality and it doesn't seem as bad anymore. Story 36. This aligns with the Strauss-Howe generational theory or fourth turning theory, which describes a theorized recurring generation cycle in American history and global history. Each generation is made up of 4 eras: turnings of high, awakening, unraveling, crisis. According to the theory, we are in the 4th turning crisis now, which started around 2008 with the War on Terror, Great Recession, and now COVID pandemic. The theory suggests that each era lasts around 15 to 22 years. While I would like to think that Biden can win and we can usher in a new era of high, I believe we are going to have to wait until 2024 for us to get out of crisis. Story 37. Bad decade. We've crossed the hockey stick with climate change. 2020 is the start of a bad millennium. 2020 is just the opening rumblings of what is coming. Barely a few million excess deaths this year. There'll be a time not too long from now that a month that low will be news as water shortages, famines, mass relocations and resource wars start to pick up. Story 38. As someone who was born in '84, you merely adopted the recession. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see savings until I was 30 years old. By then it was nothing to me but a few $100s. Story 39. Oof, good lord, no. Since hindsight is 2020 was commonly used as a phrase for looking back with clarity, hopefully this is the year we look back on and learn from. Story 40. Between the rise of ubernationalism, global warming, political instabilities, decline of global order, COVID brought economic recession, I don't see much hope for the next decade, nor do I see the next part of the entire century to be free of more bad things for everyone. Story 41. From this point forward in humanity's existence, things will only get worse. The future will be more about just trying to survive than anything. Climate change is going to wreak havoc on the earth. COVID isn't likely to go away. More pandemics with other viruses are bound to happen. The economic and social disruptions from these hardships will be bad too. Story 42. The bad decade started in 2016, at least for the Western world, when Trump was elected and Brexit was passed. Both of these signaled that stupidity, short-sightedness and greed had won the votes, even if not technically the popular votes. With leaders of better quality and an interest in global betterment through cooperation, all the current issues could have been minimized. Story 43. Why would you even present that idea for consideration? This has been my fear most of the year. What is it that makes everyone think things will just automatically improve when the ball drops? Story 44. Then we just need to buy more guns, buy stills to make our own alcohol. The alcohol is to be used as a currency, a disinfectant, and a fuel, and also, a byproduct of making alcohol is distilled water, which happens to be pure. Story 45. Considering global warming still isn't being taken as seriously as it should be, and that way too many people still support Trump along with COVID measures also not being taken seriously by the common public. Rise in cases everywhere. My faith in this coming decade is low AF. Story 46. It's possible. Democracies under assault around the world. Climate change's effects are showing up way earlier than scientists anticipated. There's a pandemic going on that shows no sign of abating. Disinformation is at an all-time high, and historically speaking, it feels like we're long overdue for a global conflict that will alleviate some of the built-up pressure. But in spite of it all, the next decade or two doesn't have to be awful. For starters, the next generation of leaders needs to step up now and begin making their presence known on the national and international stages. We must start taking responsibility for our collective future and not wait for someone else to do it for us. Story 47. 2020 is just a blip on a centuries-long decline. Sorry to break it to you. Story 48. 2020 COVID-19 2021 COVID-19 COVID-20 COVID-21. Turns out someone is doing it on purpose. We destroys them at the cost of widespread devastation. 2022 ANTS, which are the worst. 2023 Glitter Pony Aliens, Intergalactic War, Eventual Peace but Widespread Devastation, 2024 Pony Disease. 2025, Glitter Pony Aliens Return. More Intergalactic War, Eventual Peace but Widespread Devastation. 2026 Pony Disease. 2027, Ants Return, which is still the worst. 2028 President Peace Elected, Peace Reigns Supreme, which signals the permanent end of freedom. 2029, all forms of communication shut down. All hail President PAC. Story 49. Personally, this whole her 2020 bad 2021 will be better sentiment bothers me a little, but I mean, sure there has been some exceptionally bad things that happen that are out of our control, but a huge chunk of how shitty this year is a direct result of the buildup of apathy humanity has had for the planet and their fellow humans in recent years. We are reaping what we've sown, people, and a calendar year isn't going to fix it. Story 50. Just keep in mind that 2020 has had plenty of amazing things too. For God's sakes, scientists found new pockets of water on the moon just a few days ago. That's pretty amazing and a little disappointing that it doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's a whole other planetary body. I think this whole thing has kind of turned into a similar mindset of people turning 30. There's literally no difference between being 29 or 31 years old, but because people psych themselves up in anticipation of turning 30, they inevitably focus on it that way too. Thus it becomes a big deal even though it logically isn't. So yeah, 2020 has had a lot of mishaps, and the CV definitely makes that obvious and in the forefront of everyone's mind. But in reality, it's had the same ebbs and flows of most any other year. Many countries have even had serious virus outbreaks in recent years. They just haven't been quite as widespread. Story 51. It is, the next 10 years will be mostly bad, due to the following factors: climate change, COVID and similar kinds of advanced viruses, financial inequality. We currently have the largest wealth gap since the French Revolution, the rise of fascism around the globe. The truth is no longer valued as highly as it once was. Mainstream politicians have been encouraging extremism and stoking conspiracy theories, and intentionally making it more difficult for the regular person to tell the difference between truth and lies. Social media only accelerates this issue. These things will continue to get worse regardless of who the president is. Story 52. Decades end after every 10 years, and start years that end with 1. If the decade of 2021 to 2030 is also bad, that's 11 years of bad, and that's just unrealistic. Story 53. We've already reached the end of history. The world has already passed the point of no return. The rest of the 21st century will be a continuous slow tightening of the noose as entirely preventable problems become worse and worse. The economic ruling class prefer this outcome rather than giving up a small amount of their control in order to solve these issues. So those of us who make it through okay will be living probably somewhat comfortably in a total control matrix that ensures the permanent dominance of the elites. However, a huge portion of the global population is considered expendable, and they will be the ones to suffer most as the noose tightens and life becomes ever more precarious. Expect more pandemics, environmental disasters, economic crises, terrorism, civil unrest, etc., etc. It will all happen in slow motion, but it will escalate in frequency and severity. The real shame here is that we could have done something about this, but the voting public has been successfully duped into thinking that any corrective measures are basically Stalinism, and that's entirely deliberate. The answers are right in front of all of us, but the majority still believe in the capitalist neoliberal world order, or worse, as if that system is capable of anything other than benefiting the ruling class. I've made peace with it. Get money, don't have kids, enjoy the good things in life as much as possible. Hopefully live decently, and then leave this pathetic planet forever.